All right, yeah, welcome back, everybody. So this next session, I think, is going to be really interesting because it's about data marketplace, and we are lucky to have Mike Ferguson, managing director at Intelligence Business Strategies, to tell us about it. So, without further ado, Mike, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Jean-Pascal. Let me just share my screen here. So I hope you can all see that. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you may be. Great pleasure to be presenting here. So my topic is building an enterprise data marketplace. What I'd like to talk about is, first of all, the need for a high quality data foundation to support decision making and how that's being built and incrementally built to produce data products. And somehow we need to be able to share these data products around the enterprise. And so that's really where I'm going to start introducing data marketplace as a way to share data and try to explain the difference between that and a data catalog and look at the challenges of establishing and setting these up and what you need to think about to be able to operate a data marketplace and govern data sharing using that technology in order to be able to remain compliant when we're sharing data around the enterprise and beyond. And in addition to that, also, I'd like to talk about the trends, which is, is just data going to end up in a marketplace, or are we going to see something more? And how can all of this help really allow us to shorten time to value more rapidly? So if I look at the expectations around data and analytics today, it's huge. In the boardroom, this is front and center. It's no longer nice to have. It's absolutely mission critical to business transformation, to competitive advantage, to people's ability to move as a business and make changes in the markets that they operate in. And so expectations are very high. But if you're going to be able to do this, you have to have a solid data foundation of high quality governed data that underpins the insights coming out to support the decisions around the enterprise. And what we're seeing, I think, increasingly now is a trend, and the trend is to use data fabric, for example, to create a kind of common platform by which teams of people can produce data products in order to incrementally build up a data foundation of governed shareable data that can be reused around the enterprise. And let's be clear what I mean by data products. I've read lots of articles that say that almost everything is the data product. I find those very confusing. So for this presentation, I'm going to make a distinction between data products and analytical products. Data products are physical, reusable data sets, typically with a global identifier. Or they could be virtual data products. That is, they look like they're integrated and persisted, but they're not. And so it could be provisioned through data virtualization, for example. Or it could be a SQL script, which is published as a service, and when you invoke it, it delivers a data product on demand. And analytical products, on the other hand, things like BI reports, machine learning models, recommenders, even beyond that, AI bots, plans, dashboards, etc. These are things that are produced using data from analytical products. So I'm making that distinction here for this presentation. Now, data product development and data sharing needs to be governed, and there has to be objectives of that. We need to be able to produce trusted, compliant, secure data products that are available for consumption, make sure that those are available to consumers, and that the terms of use of data that you want to share are available in an agreement, and that those terms of use need to be accepted by a data consumer before the data can be shared. And then we can then monitor and track and audit the sharing of data around the enterprise and beyond, and also try to make sure that we prevent the sharing of sensitive data for two reasons. One, to avoid things like data breaches. If consent is not given, we don't want to have data sharing if consent's not given, but also there could be legal reasons why data sharing across borders may not be permitted by sending physical data copies somewhere else in the world in a different legal jurisdiction. And we have to be able to monitor and report on all the kind of activities going on with data sharing. And I think the whole idea about data products is being fueled even more so now by data mesh, which is a decentralized data engineering approach which emerged in 2019. Kind of 2022 probably was the year where there was a huge amount of hype and interest around data mesh. A lot of companies now starting to implement this with decentralized data engineers producing data products, and typically often doing that using data fabric as a common platform to be able to produce those data products that be consumed and used for multiple analytical workloads, whether that's to do with data warehouses or data science or graph analytics, or even in streaming analytics. And the data fabric market has exploded, and there's a lot happening here. Probably the last major announcement would have been around Microsoft with the Microsoft Fabric. Earlier this year, we saw SAP enter this market with DataSphere. And so there's a tough, highly competitive space that are in, and often these data fabric offerings include a data catalog. But when it comes to building data products, there's a number of steps here. One of the ways in which companies are doing it is to create data concept models and then use the concept models to jumpstart the definition of data products within a business glossary, to create those and then have subject matter experts define the data attributes describing each of those data products. And then from there, I'm able to then discover where the data may be and then produce the data products. So perhaps with a data catalog, it can discover the source data that's out there automatically. And these days, data catalogs can not just discover physical data names and catalog them, but they can increasingly map to the business glossary terms that would describe data products within the data catalog. And that's important because now we know what the data catalog, what the business glossary says a data product is. It also then says where the data is to be able to produce it and how that data out there maps to that definition. And from there, we can then build pipelines to produce the data products that need to be created for our data foundation. And we need to publish them somewhere. And that somewhere is typically a data marketplace, which is the subject of this presentation, so that we can publish data for people to shop for and be able to pick up and use as ready-made, high-quality, compliant data products that they can share. So a data marketplace is really a catalog application whose job it is not only to publish data products, but to govern the use of them, to govern the publishing and the sharing and the use of ready-made, high-quality data and analytical products that are available with supporting metadata on common data names to describe what the data means, and if necessary, full lineage so that a consumer can see how the data product was constructed. And then we can organize these data products and make them easy for people to find and request access to. There's already a number of technologies in the marketplace, excuse the pun, data marketplace technologies in the marketplace that we can potentially look at. Some of the examples shown on the right-hand side of this chart. But there's a distinction. There's public data marketplaces and internal data marketplaces. Public data marketplaces being things like Snowflake Data Marketplace and Databricks Data Marketplace, which are really bringing together data from different external data providers For example, in the financial markets, something like Bloomberg or Standard and Poor's, or it could be weather data. It could be a whole range of different external data providers that are already loaded, if you like, ready to go. And you subscribe to use that marketplace, and the vendor of the marketplace deals with the suppliers of the data, handles that, and make sure all the data is already loaded so that when you put your data onto that platform, you can just join and make use of this additional external data to enrich what you may already know. So these are typically monetized public data marketplaces. Then there's internal data marketplaces, which is really about the data that you produce internally within the enterprise that you want to publish and share across your organization. And it could be that the same technology is used to support both public external data as well as internal data products that you want to publish. And increasingly, these data marketplaces are also publishing machine learning models that you can share across the enterprise, and along with data owners or data stewards that are managing these, who you can, if necessary, request permission to access the data within these data products from. And then you can govern the sharing of data using this technology. Now, so therefore, data marketplaces aren't just a shop window. They're part of a governance program. Now, for most organizations who are doing data governance, they have some kind of data governance framework. This is mine. And it's just about governing the data lifecycle from data that comes into your enterprise, either through the keyboard or through ingestion, and governing the entire lifecycle to the point of archive or point of deletion. And we need people, processes, policies, and technologies to do that. And we need capabilities to govern the data across a distributed data estate, encompassing on-premises data stores, cloud-based data stores, software as a service applications, and the edge. And so where does data marketplaces fit within governance capabilities? Well, as you can see here, it's a capability that allows me to help govern data sharing within the enterprise. Of course, there are a number of capabilities that we need for end-to-end data governance. Capabilities to understand the data within our data landscape, and capabilities to be able to govern the data within our data landscape, of which the data marketplace is one of those capabilities. It's also a vitally important piece of technology supporting data mesh, because clearly data producers need to be able to publish their data products that they create somewhere, need to be able to allow the data products to be available with perhaps data quality metrics, so that people have the confidence to know that this is high quality data. A business glossary to know how what the data means. As I said, lineage to say how it was constructed. Perhaps there's things like version management, as well as understanding the policies around these data products to be able to govern them, whether that's data access security policies, data privacy policies, if the data products contain sensitive data, or it could be data sharing policies as well to govern data being shared across and potentially outside the enterprise. And certainly a data marketplace could be provided by a data catalog, but it's typically a data catalog application that might use the metadata within a data catalog. So the idea about data products in a data mesh is that you don't build pipelines to populate a single analytical system on the right-hand side. You build reusable data products once and publish them in an internal data marketplace for people to consume and use to support multiple different analytical workloads, whether that's data warehousing, graph analysis, data science, and even on the right-hand side, some of these types of analytical data store are converging, for example, cloud storage and data warehouse. But the point is build once and reuse everywhere. This is an insurance example that I'm looking at. And so decouple the production of data products from the analytical systems so that we build these once and reuse them everywhere. So the data marketplace is really the place where the output from producers becomes known to the data consumers that's available. So it's a sharing mechanism. And if you're going to build one of these, you need some way to operate a data marketplace, which means we need to be able to think about what's needed for that. Publishing data and analytical products. Well, what are the roles and responsibilities to do that? What is the process? Is there a standard process to be able for everyone to govern or publish data products? Is there a governance process for that? How do I govern who's allowed to publish and what consumers are allowed to consume? We need to think about that and the policies around it. How do we make it easy for the consumers to find the data that they need? And to collaborate, perhaps to ask others, have you used this this data product before? Have you, could anyone tell me what they think about it? So ask questions about it, maybe even ask questions of the owner who may have intimate knowledge of what the data product is, as well as other people who've maybe used it. So collaboration is important. We also may want to enrich, maybe consumers want to add additional data to that data product, in which case they then need to potentially go through a standard publishing process the same way as the original producers did in order to make sure that the data products are correctly published in a governed manner. We've got to provide a number of interfaces for them, monitor the data products that are in use, who's using them, all of that, to be able to understand the usage patterns of data around the enterprise, and maybe to go further to recommend data products going forward with AI finding its way into data marketplaces. And if necessary, monetize if you're looking to generate new revenue streams off of this kind of data. So as a guideline, I've included this slide. I'm not going to walk through it in detail, of just potential roles and responsibilities that you could use in setting up a data product, including the producers, the data product owners, who may be an approver. Well, of course, there could be multiple approvers when it comes to sharing data. I'll talk about that later. There could be a data stewards who are governing, their jobs to govern, monitoring and upholding the policies associated with these data products. They wouldn't set them, the data product owner would set the policies, or there could be certain policies that need to be enterprise-wide, like data privacy. We need a taxonomy designer, perhaps, if you have a lot of data products, to organize them, make them easy for people to zoom in and find the ones that they're looking for. And of course, the consumer themselves, who wants the right to do this. Now, I talked about a formal publishing process for data products in a marketplace. What does that mean? Well, we need some way to quality assure this, rather than just everybody throw anything in there. What we really want is the ability to make sure that there's a minimum bar here, including a data quality score, including documented business data names where people can see what the data means, full lineage if they want to understand how it was constructed, and of course all the policies around governing the data in terms of protecting access, upholding data privacy obligations, and any data sharing and retention policies. But there also needs, as I've highlighted, to be a data sharing agreement defined, specifying the terms and conditions around this, because this is how we govern. We need the consumer to accept the terms and conditions before they're given access, so that we can have an audit trail of that and understand who's using the data. And so in that sense, I think that's a fairly new capability, but something is very, very important when it comes to governing data sharing. We'd also like some way to know that this is, let's say, safe or high quality, it's fit for business use. And some kind of labeling like this that you see, for example, just taking a random example from a data catalog, such as Microsoft Purview, you can label these things. And of course, social rating would be another way to do this. But the key point about data marketplaces is they've got to answer this question. If people have new business problems, things that they have to answer, questions that they need answered, they have to be able to, first of all, know, well, is there anything out there that could help me that already exists? And of course, the place you would like them to go is the data marketplace for that, which, as I said, could be a catalog application. And the kind of capabilities you want there is you want a search box for people to quickly find that. Maybe faceted search to zoom in if on the data product if there's a lot of those. We'd like to know, is it trusted? Is it highly rated? Are we rating it in terms of business value? Is there any sensitive data here? Is there any other recommended data products that I should know about? So perhaps have the marketplace make those recommendations. Can I order it and specify how I want to have it delivered? And can I see who owns it? These are some of the things that we'd like. And so if you're looking for requirements for a data product, if you're evaluating this kind of software, then very clearly you'd like this kind of capability. Search boxes and faceted search and assisted navigation if necessary with recommendations, being able to put favorites up there so that you bookmark these things and come back to them later. Maybe even organize them by business objectives so that you know which data products are contributing to which business goals. So it's almost like I want like Amazon. I mean, like a retailer user interface, where you can see here, this is just Amazon retail, where I'm looking for books and I've got a search box and I've got books here and I got faceted search on the left-hand side. I can see it's rated, how many people rated it, and there's a shopping cart, and if I want to zoom in on something like, I don't know, if I zoom in on that for a second, something like interface design, well, I know there's 72 books on interface design, and that would narrow my search. I kind of want the same, but for data products, not just for books as we see here. And this is what we're seeing emerging in data marketplaces. For example, here from Calibra, the search box, data products, rating, faceted search, and a data basket. If I was to look at Informatica cloud data marketplace, they've got data categories. If you've got a number of data products and you want to group them into categories, make it easier for you to find so that you could zoom in and see that. I can go in and get more detail about a data product. I can order it by going to checkout. I can see descriptive information about the data product and even terms of use. Now, it also lets you see your orders. So for example, I can then go back and see, well, what's the status of my orders? Which ones have been fulfilled? Which ones are still pending approval? I've got that capability. So it knows this. And we're now seeing data marketplaces also publishing machine learning models. I noticed that Databricks, for example, have announced that very recently at the Data and AI conference in San Francisco, that they now support machine learning models in their marketplace. So it's not just data that we're getting in here. We're getting machine learning models as well, which I described as an analytical product earlier. And here you see the terms of use. So you can see that in this particular case, there's personally identifiable data within the data product, and therefore it's controlled by terms of use, which therefore means that the consumer is going to have to accept the terms of use before they can even gain access to the data product. And that's important, for legal reasons and auditing reasons. And obviously, you can submit your order, and maybe you don't want to see the personal information but you'd like to request a version of it without the personal data in it. But you can submit your order, and it'll go to perhaps the owner for approval. It might even go through multiple approvers before you're given access to it. For example, if it did contain personal information. And you can see the timeline from the point that you ordered it right through to fulfillment here. I'll let you keep track of that. And then there's other vendors out there like Snowflake Data Marketplace, which I said is a public marketplace with pre-loaded data products already loaded up on the Snowflake platform that you can just join your data that's up there to the external data here by paying a fee to use the Snowflake Data Marketplace. Similarly is true for the Databricks one as well. And so the idea behind this is that I can get to the point where a consumer is consumption has to be governed. And so they may find what they're looking for in a data marketplace, but then find that they're not permitted to access it. And so they want the right to then request the access, perhaps through ordering the data product. And then it has to go to perhaps the owner for an approval or rejection. And if the owner approves, then either they're immediately granted or alternatively, perhaps a data steward does that on behalf of the owner and then provides access to the data consumer. And as I said, for data mesh, that's what we need. We need the data marketplace to be the shop window of reusable data products that can be picked up and used to support multiple different kinds of analytical workloads. And so that those consumers can then take those data products and build additional things with it, new value reports, or perhaps new machine learning models, even other data products that will drive new value. And of course, the business users should be able to shop for data and just order it. And they want the ability to know not only about their orders, but the data that they use. And here you can again see that the data marketplace is tracking usage by the consumer. And so you're able to kind of, understand how data is being used around the enterprise. And that's kind of important to be able to try to provision data more accurately to different kinds of business users around the enterprise, depending upon what they need and what they're trying to do in their part of the business. We're also seeing, in many cases now, ratings. And ultimately, I think we will even see things like, well, who's using data and data products? And then could I follow them? A bit like a social network breaking out inside your enterprise to be around data. So you can then see, interest around data within your enterprise and watch that living organism emerge. And you can then see how it moves over time. Is anything new that's appeared in the data marketplace now all of a sudden hot, whilst other things perhaps are aging and starting to not be used. And so we continually see evolution in the use of data across the enterprise to drive business value. But there's one thing that's plagues or worries a lot of people, I suppose, which is if you're going to publish data products in the data marketplace, I guess the last thing you want is everybody to download a copy. For all kinds of reasons. We don't want tons of redundancy all over the enterprise. But also, we don't want to lose governance of it. And so if you were to take a copy of data, you would absolutely want the provisioning mechanism to catalog the copy, not just the original data that you used. Otherwise, you would, it would disappear. It would disappear, and you wouldn't know where that data is. So I think increasingly what we're seeing is just because we give people or grant people the ability to use the data doesn't mean we have to give it out as a physical copy, but perhaps data virtualization becomes the way in which we can bring together data and share it around the organization, give them access to that, those data products, or even to combine those data products without necessarily having to physically store them somewhere else and then do that somewhere else. But I think what we are seeing is that we want the ability to be able to then see who uses, monitor this and audit it, see who's using it as part of a governance process, to understand the frequency of use, which is going to help us understand what's valuable and perhaps what's not. And when we say frequency of use, it might end up also being, well, how many reports are reliant on this data product, or how many machine learning models, or how frequently was this machine learning model executed, and it relies on data within this data product. So we need to understand this and understand navigational patterns to try and get more personalized recommendations to people, to make it easier for them to get the data they need and get it more rapidly as and when they need it, and to introduce AI in here to self-learn and get progressively better at doing that across the enterprise. I think that's absolutely the direction that we're headed in. And for those that do want to monetize, well, that opens up a whole ton of other things like licensing and pricing and various other legal agreements and stuff like that. That's going to involve other departments around the enterprise to discuss these things. But what you certainly would like is that the marketplace supports the functionality to give you that option if you want to take it. Now, I want to just spend the last sort of 10 minutes or so asking you to think a little bit beyond data here, because we're already seeing that data marketplaces are publishing machine learning models. And we know over the last decade that there's been a ton of different data science tools out there, whether it's SageMaker or CDOIQ or IBM Watson Studio or others, or whether you're just writing Jupyter notebooks and building machine learning models that way, training them up and deploying them. And there's a variety of those. Now, clearly what we would like is a common way in which to let everybody know what machine learning models are deployed and available that you can potentially use, perhaps as a recommendation service or as a predictor. Similarly, the same is true for BI reports. I mean, most of my clients have got a range of BI reports around the enterprise. BI tools, I beg your pardon, around the enterprise. So they could have BI reports produced by multiple different tools. I don't want to have to log into each of these tools to find out what reports are available. I'd like to go somewhere where I could just see, well, what do we have that's available, to reduce fraud, for example, what BI reports, what machine learning models, what data. And I think, we will see people using data products and producing these new artifacts, these new analytical products. And we'd like those published back, subject to approval and going through a publishing process, back in the marketplace, so that other people can then start using those. And hopefully we get faster then, because 60%, 70%, 80% of what you need is already made. So you're standing on the shoulders of the people who've been there before you, and get progressively faster at using this stuff. So it opens up, how many of these analytical products could be published potentially in a marketplace. And I think a lot. And I think the general trend is it started with machine learning models, but I don't think it's going to end there. And also, there's another requirement why this is important, because the last mile is to integrate this within our processes and our applications to really get data-driven, intelligent business. I mean, that's what we really would like to do. It's not just make data available for data scientists and BI users. I regularly see statistics that say BI users is only 25 to 30% of the employee base. Well, what about the rest? How are they going to get it? How many people contribute to a business goal in your company? Is it like, if I have a goal like, well, improving customer engagement to maximize sales? Well, who contributes to that? Is it your operations people, or some of them? Is it people in middle management? Is it executives, or is it some combination of all of them? See, I would argue that it's some combination of all of them. And if that's the case, then they're trying to contribute to a common objective. They need to know what's available. If you really are going to become data driven and use this stuff at all of these levels, we need to know what's available, right? I mean, so it's like, well, what's in play? If I've got a business strategy and it says my strategic objective is improve customer engagement, I want to know, well, what data and what BI reports and what machine learning models are available, and where in the enterprise it's going to contribute to that. Is it front office? Is it back office? Is it a combination of these things? If I'm trying to reduce risk like fraud, then, well, what's contributing to that? What is there out there? What data, what machine learning models are able to do that? What BI reports? I want to know that. And similarly, if I'm optimizing a particular part of operation, like a supply chain, same thing. So there's collections of these things that need to be brought together, and we understand and classified and organized so that we know what we're building and what's out there that we can potentially use to deliver the value to contribute towards these common goals. And so that's why I think we don't just need a data foundation here. We need all these analytical products and these data products, and we have to publish them somewhere, because we need to use them at different parts of the enterprise, whether you're in HR or marketing or sales or service or operations. There's stuff out there that's relevant to you to deliver on these goals. And for me, that's why these marketplaces are becoming super important and will be more so going forward. If we want to integrate insights and machine learning models and BI into business processes, I need to know what's available, and so that I can do that. I need somewhere to tell me that. If I want to build these pipelines and take advantage of this data and these machine learning models and deliver insights into marketing or sales or service or HR or operations, I need somewhere to know where is all of this stuff and what's out there, so I don't reinvent it. So to me, the direction here is quite clear. Data marketplace is going to become central to most organizations, where they can use it as a shop window, not just for data products, but for analytical products as well, that I can potentially use in different parts of my enterprise. And so we can govern that from a common place. But also we can make recommendations to help people in different parts of the business deliver on this kind of business value. We can provide a place where people know what's available that they can integrate into their apps. So developers can even start using this to say, well, what analytical services and data products can I integrate with my apps and create embedded analytics or intelligent apps? Or even, what bots can I use? What AI bots, whether those decision automation or whether it's task automation, could I use in my enterprise in order to make me more data driven? So the marketplace becomes a focal point for that. So the way I see this going forward is that it's absolutely at the core of our enterprise going forward. It is the shop window for everything that we want to be able to make us data driven. so that we can integrate it into the different parts of our business and really make the company intelligent. So it's not business intelligence, it's intelligent business. So to wrap it up then, I would say data marketplace is fast becoming critical to publish data and analytical products for people to use, to be able to route and approve access to govern that and govern the sharing. I think it's a catalog application that we can search, provide access to supporting business metadata and lineage if necessary, and all of the policies which are going into data catalogs can be used to help govern those data products. And it's not just a shop window, it's a true governance mechanism, but it's also an enabler to help us really become data-driven going forward. So with that, I'd like to say thank you very much and hand back over to Jean-Pascal, and maybe we got some time for a few questions.
Wow, this is fascinating. Really, I find this really, really interesting. So I have a question, maybe an observation first.
Mm-hmm.
I see a lot of activity in this space from the supply side, vendors, products, companies, startups popping up. There is a lot of activity, and every other year there are new words that pop up around that activity, and you talk about how these things are sort of converging towards the needs of the consumer side and materializing in the form of a marketplace.
Yes.
What about the demand side? Where is the pull? I see a lot of push. I don't see a lot of pull. Or has the
That's a good
pull
point.
not been formulated properly quite yet? Maybe because you talk about the business strategies. We want to be data driven. Okay, great.
Yeah.
But what does that mean exactly? And maybe is it the problem that it has not translated yet into a crisp demand, which matches the supply of marketplaces? Like, can you talk about this? What I see as a bit of a disconnect between the supply of this whole machinery and the demand for it.
No, that's a very good question. I mean, I think this whole thing has to have a common anchor point. It has to be business strategy. It has to be strategic business goals and objectives and what you're trying to achieve as a business. Then you can build the data products and the analytical products needed to deliver on that. So there has to be coordination across the enterprise. It is absolutely not push. It has to be pull, but the pull has got to be coming from the alignment with business strategy to get people to deliver on those common goals. And so that's got to be the anchor, in my opinion. I think if you just go and build all these data products and stuff and push it out there, that's the field of dreams approach. It just doesn't work. It's not just build everything, build all this stuff, and everybody's going to come and use it. Absolutely not. I think it has to be organized. That's why I talked about a taxonomy designer as part of this. I also talked about labeling the data products and analytical products with business objective, tag it, if you like, to be able to say, well, which data products are being used to reduce fraud, for example, or which analytical products being used to reduce fraud. So the business value is coming from using these things to drive new value to achieve a goal. If the goal is improve customer engagement, then it's, well, what have we built to do that? If it's reducing risk, then what are we doing? What are we building to do that? So this is also about coordination. We have to know who's building what and for what purpose. And then how does it get organized in a marketplace so that people know what they can use to help deliver value in their area, if they're accountable for contributing to a business objective. And so to me, it's not everything that we produce, it's organizing what we produce and making sure that we're building these things in line with business strategy. So we all hear the fact that it's important to have data and analytics strategy aligned with business strategy. Too right it is. Absolutely has to be that way. If we don't have a business strategy to align with, then we really are running blind. So yeah, I think it has got to be pulled, but the common way to do that, the right way to do that, in my opinion, is is that it's the business strategy which will dictate it.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes sense. So to everyone in the audience, feel free to post the questions in the Q&A. We have some time. I see that there is a question here. Where do you see the technology for data marketplaces heading in the next 3 to 5 years? I wish there were more products out there that support marketplaces. I think we are at the very beginning of this market. Where will this tech come from? Data catalogs, data pipeline products, data marketplace vendors. What's your take on that?
That's a great question. My
And by the way,
take on it,
Mike, I'm sorry,
yeah.
Mike. Do you want to stop sharing?
Oh, sorry. Yes, of
Y-
course.
Yes.
I guess you're just looking at me, which is rather look at me in reality, not just a. Okay, here we go. Um, yes, I would say the direction I believe is it's the usual story. We'll see a number of startups, but I think the direction is pretty clear. It's going to converge with data fabric, in
Mm,
my opinion. So it'll become a capability within data fabric offerings. And so already we're seeing that with one or two of those data fabric vendors today. If, for example, Informatica and IBM. But I think that's a general trend that we will see that happening, or we may see you know a data marketplace vendor partner with other best of breed vendors that are not competing with them, but kind of complementary. I suppose the in term for that at the moment is the modern data stack of a bunch of different vendors who are not trying to cover the whole thing end to end, but are together coming into pre-integration or joint developments to integrate their tooling to offer the whole thing end to end. And so it could happen in both ways. But I do think what we're seeing at the moment is data products, some of which are now offering machine learning models. There's also small startups out in the market out there today that are offering what I would call an analytical marketplace, like just telling me about the BI reports, for example, or the machine learning models that are out there. I think they'll converge eventually, but I think we're going to have some kind of enterprise data marketplace, or if we're a very large organization, you might see a federated setup where there are a number of marketplaces, but there's some kind of overarching shop window that'll let you into those different marketplaces. The last thing we want, of course, is different parts of the business reinventing the same thing again and again. That's not very helpful, which is why I think coordination of who's building these things and for what business purpose really matters. And that's why I think the publishing process will hold people accountable. If you go build these things, you're going to publish it, you have to show that it's contributing to value, not just I just built this, so publish it because it's cool.
of course, yeah. And so, do you see companies or specific companies, specific industries of certain size doing this well? Or even maybe not doing it yet, but um, having translated the business strategy into the need for data marketplace and the rest of the architecture that underpins the data marketplace?
I wouldn't say that it's I've definitely seen organizations, highly decentralized organizations, that are moving at a pace by building data products. For example, here in Europe, one example of that would be Roche Diagnostics, who presented at Big Data London, which is a conference I chair here in Europe. Um, uh, Massive improvement in data in productivity by being able to publish reusable data products, and so shortening the time to value. I wouldn't say that there's a large number of very mature organizations in this area, because it's just a relatively young
Yeah.
space anyway. So I think it would be wrong to say that there are, people fully implemented end to end here. But I do think one thing is clear: is executives have seen a decade of a frenzy of development of all of this stuff. And I think what they're asking for now is, okay, tidy it all up, organize it, and make it available for use. And they want this decade to be the decade of use, not the decade of just keep building. I think executives want this to start delivering real value, and therefore they want a facility like a marketplace to help them understand, well, what's been built and for what purpose, so that they can even rate it internally, understand the value that it's contributing towards, and share it around the organization. I mean, I think that's important, but I wouldn't say that we are mature yet in this area.
Mm. Okay. I see there is a new question on the Hoover platform. I love that you brought up data virtualization. This is key not just for distributing products without creating copies, as you say, but creating them.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe the new pipeline is a data product owner who queries a database to create a virtual data asset and then publishes it into a marketplace by adding new metadata and going through a governance process, as you say.
Potentially, yes. I mean, I think data virtualization has an absolute role to play here. It could be used to simplify access to raw data, even to build a data product in the first place. It could be that there is a virtual data product that you could then publish. There's nothing, as I said, in my definition of data products, at least, nothing to say that it shouldn't be. It has to be physical data products. I mean, you could have virtual data products available. So I think it could come either way. But obviously, what we're trying to do with data sharing is not drive up what I would call the data redundancy. We don't want thousands of downloads of copies of the same data. It's it's just not a governance story we want to tell. I mean, I think that would just be your worst nightmare in trying to figure out which copy of the data to use if there's lots of copies of them. But as I said in the presentation, I mean, the one thing about that is, we want to make sure that even if there is a physical provisioning of data products somewhere else from a marketplace, that process of provisioning that data makes sure that the copy of the data is cataloged, because it has to remain visible from a governance point of view, and any policies associated with that data that govern access to it, privacy, retention, or whatever it may be, need to be upheld, even in the case of the copy of the data as well. So, that's why I believe, data marketplace isn't just a shop window to just throw anything up there. It's actually a governance mechanism, and its job is to take on responsibility, if you like, for governing data sharing. And that's why we're seeing things like terms of use um, being created within data marketplaces. And I also think, perhaps even the data producers don't necessarily have full understanding of legal obligations, and so it might be that as part of the publishing process, there's actually a flow that has to happen to make sure that the policies are in place for that data product to uphold your legal obligations. I mean, I talked about cross-border data sharing. We're now dealing with different privacy laws in different parts of the world.
Of course.
In Europe, we have GDPR. In the United States, I think it's even state level data privacy in the US, which, I mean, I thought GDPR was hard enough doing 27 countries, but 50 GDPRs in one country is like insane as far as I can see. But nevertheless, if you're trying to share data and you have to remain compliant with in multiple legal jurisdictions, then you need to make sure that the policies that are in play are actually governing that, to make sure that you don't inadvertently violate those obligations.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um,
And
mhm,
one other thing I should say, by the way, as well, is I think one thing that is needed with a data marketplace, perhaps that I didn't mention, is that data loss prevention. Is a big thing these days. Everybody, no one wants the brand damage of a public data breach. So I think one thing I would say is that data loss prevention needs to integrate with data marketplaces,
right.
so that even if um, data access is granted, um, if, for example, that data was then accidentally overshared, if you like, with certain people who were just not authorized to see it, you would like still something to step in and block it. And that's why I think, even though data marketplace is governing data sharing, I think data loss prevention would need to plug into it to
Mm,
make sure that those policies are correctly adhered to.
yeah. At the beginning of the presentation, you said something very interesting to me. You talked about the on-demand data product
Yes.
with the example of a SQL query.
SQL script. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, if the data product is the SQL query, is that the start of the data product not just being data, but being code? Because if it can be a SQL query, it can be a Java program, it can be anything, right? Do you see
Uh,
this so now we are beyond data virtualization?
oh, sure we are. Yeah.
Do you see
Um,
this as a
no,
thing
it's a
emerging?
good point. It's a good point. I think this is I mean, there's a few things that I think about data products, and others may disagree, and I'm all willing to still learn here, because this is still emerging. I'm of the opinion that data products need a enterprise-wide identifier.
Hmm.
So a SQL script that's going to run to produce a data product would need to produce a data product that still upholds that kind of capability. So I was reluctant to say, well, should it just be a SQL query or should it be a script? I mean, clearly a single query these days can be pretty long. You can do a lot of powerful things within it. Um, I think it would have to be governed. There's no question about that. It has to be governed, because otherwise anybody could just write any old code. I don't mean that in any disrespectful way, but people could. You can write anything. Code can be pretty powerful. And we have to make sure that this is governed correctly. So I think when it comes to something like that, then it would have to go through approval. And um, then potentially, yes. I guess the reason I put that in there is because potentially it's on demand. Now, you could argue data virtualization. I can create a virtual table which has a query, and therefore when you execute it, it delivers the data product. And so in that sense, that's true. You could potentially argue that a full-blown pipeline could be published as a service, and therefore I just invoke the pipeline and it produces the data product on demand, even if it stores it. And so in that sense, again, though, I think that's an approval process. That has to happen in order to be able to um, uh, do that. So if we're provisioning by invoking a pipeline, then I think the pipeline would have to include, I think, API calls in order to make sure that the provisioning was was audited and tracked. I mean, I think there's got to be some kind of standards around this to be able to do that.
Yeah. I mean, we are running out of time, but when you were talking about the Amazon analogy, some
Yes.
books that you order on Amazon are printed on demand, and when it's printed on demand, the latest version is printed, including the some of the grammatical errors that were in the version of yesterday printed today, and today you have a version that has the some of the correction. And so I totally agree with you that it's the tightness of the governance here, it becomes really, really important, because you may request the data product right now and then 5 minutes later and get a different result.
Absolutely. In fact, it may even be the case that you want to do version management within a marketplace, because there could be a new version of this data product is even more valuable than the older one. And so you want to sort of supersede, if you like, what you published maybe 6 months ago with a new one, or whatever it may be. So in that sense, yes, I mean, I see version control as important, but I think we have to track the versions, and the policies have to apply, because there's nothing to say just because we have a new version that the policies should change. So I think there are some things here that I don't think are fully
thought.
And I don't think the functionality is there in these current technologies to show all of that yet. So I think this is evolving, and we're going to see more. Plus, dare I say, here in Europe, we're about to see the European Union AI Act.
Yeah, that's right.
And if machine learning models are going into marketplaces, then you can be sure that there's going to have to be some new governance related policies associated with that kind of regulation, at least for the machine learning models developed in Europe, or if you're sharing them with people in Europe. So I there's more regulations and stuff to come, I think, that are going to have implications on all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, this was a fascinating session, I feel. Thank you very much, Mike, for
Thank
this.
you.
And thank you to everyone for attending, and stay tuned for the next session.
And thanks to everybody for coming. Thank you. Thank you, Jean-Pascal. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.